vacation.
He's on vacation. Okay. Well, then I guess we're ready to go. Call to order the July 20th, 2020 regular Board of Aldermen meeting. Would everyone please join with me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Roll call, please, Shelley.
Mayor Dimmitt,
Here.
Alderwoman Ebley,
Here.
Alderman Gold,
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Here.
Alderwoman Tice,
Here.
Alderman Parker,
Here.
Alderwoman Sims,
Here.
and Alderman Weggie is absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Says next on the agenda is a proclamation. I think we'll go ahead and take that up. Although the agenda, approval of the agenda. Let's see here. This is a proclamation, designation of July as the Park and Recreation Month. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout the country, including the city of Brentwood, Missouri, and whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and a region. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the city of Brentwood, Missouri recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore, I, Mayor David Dimmitt, by the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, and on behalf of the Board of Aldermen, do hereby recognize the month of July as Parks and Recreation Month in the city of Brentwood, presented the 20th day of July, 2020. Next on the agenda is a public hearing, and this is a continuation of a public hearing that I think was first on the agenda last month. And with that, I will reopen case 20-03, a public hearing to consider amendment of a conditional use permit for a deck addition in conjunction with the operation of a sit-down restaurant authorized by ordinance number 4132 and located at 1921 South Brentwood Boulevard. If anybody in the public cares to speak to this issue, now is the time to do so. Shelley, do we have anybody?
If there's anyone that would like to speak, you can raise your hand. If you're just in dialing in *9, and you also have the ability to unmute yourself. There's no one.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. And with that, we will close public hearing for case 20-03. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or modifications to the agenda as submitted? Alderman Plufka, did you have something? No? Okay. Then the agenda will be approved as submitted. Next up is Item 6, citizen comments. If anybody in the public cares to address the board, now is the time to do so. You will be given up to 3 minutes. Just please state your name and address first. Shelley, are you going to monitor that? You're muted, I think, Shelley.
Yeah, I do not see anybody
Okay.
with hands up.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to the mayor and alderman reports. First up is the mayor, and I have just 2 matters, and those are both appointments. We have, what I have in front of you is a request to appoint Angela Boklar-Jones as a somebody to the library board. We have 2 openings, and this person is interested in doing this. We have Alderwoman O'Neill as the alder person who's the liaison with the library board, but this person comes highly recommended, and I would hope that the board would nominate and agree to appoint her to the board, the library board. Kathy, I don't know if you want to speak to that, or if anybody cares at this point to make a nomination. Alderwoman, I think you're muted, Kathy.
I think Jen has already talked to her and she has submitted an application and is very interested.
Great. Okay, we would entertain a motion to appoint Angela Boklar-Jones to the library board.
So moved.
Second,
Okay. So was that motion made by Alderwoman Tice, or was that Alderwoman Sims?
Alderwoman
Yes.
Sims. It's only been
Alderwoman, I'm sorry,
4
Alderwoman Sims is
years.
on one side of the screen and Alderwoman Tice is on the other. Okay, so we had a motion by Alderwoman Sims and seconded by, I don't know. Raise your hand, whoever seconded that.
I think it was Kathy.
Kathy did.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, carries according to my count, 7-0. We got 7 ayes, 0 nays. We also then have a committee assignments, and I just made a few subtle changes. One is to nominate Alderman Weggie as the chair of Public Works, and then to move Alderman Lockmuller to the chair of Public Safety. And then I also appointed Alderman Gould to both Public Works and to Ways and Means. Can we get a motion to approve those committee assignments?
So moved.
So moved. Second,
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second on that. Do we have any discussion on those appointments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody. That's it for the mayor's report. Alderwoman Eberly, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
Alderman Gould,
No report.
Alderman Lockmuller,
Yes, I guess since now I'm chair of public safety, we got a meeting in 48 hours. So we will meet virtually Wednesday, the 22nd at 5:30 virtually. Thanks.
thank you. And any report, Alderwoman O'Neill?
no report.
Alderman Pluska, any report?
No report.
Alderwoman Sims?
Only that the August Ways and Means meeting is going to be moved from the first Thursday of August. We're targeting either Wednesday the 19th or Thursday the 20th as alternative dates to allow for additional planning that'll take place between now and then to make that month's meeting more productive.
Thank you. Alderwoman Tice?
No report.
And Alderman Weggie is not with us. Okay. I want to thank, first of all, Alderman Pluska for his years of service as a chair of public safety. I think he did a phenomenal job in the what seems like 6 years that he was the chair of that committee. I'm not sure how many years he was the chair, but he was, being Dave like he is, he takes on many other obligations, and he's getting very involved in some very worthy charitable organizations. And by freeing him up as the chair of public safety, it gives him some additional time to devote to those other worthwhile organizations. So on behalf of the city, I do want to thank Alderman Pluska for his years of service. And next up is the city administrator report, item 8. We have the COVID-19 revenue and expenditure projections. Bull, are you handling that? Is Karen handling that?
I see Karen on the line, so Karen Shaw,
Okay,
Finance
Karen?
Director.
Karen, you're unmuted.
There we go.
Karen, we can't hear you. Do you want to come use my screen? Okay, you can use mine.
That's my desktop. It's not working now. Thank you. Okay, sorry. My desktop's not working and they took my laptop today, so. Can you hear me now from Shelley's? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you
Okay.
just fine, Karen.
Okay. So I don't have what I had on my desk in front of me, but if you'll go to the income statement, which is second to the last, I think that was on there. And I can give you a memo that also goes on, that goes along with this. So it was for the June financial statements, in which it was a 2-page memo, and there's a chart that goes over each page of what we need to look at, and maybe they're highlighted over to the right-hand column. So for example, page 1, account code 4002 through 4027 are the sales tax. And there's also a memo regarding that that's been updated since June. It was updated for July. It's showing that those 4, as you can see, I'm sorry, those 3, what's remaining is 46% for one, 61% for the public safety tax, and 49%. Right now, we should have been, as of June, keep in mind, these are June numbers, at 50%. So if you look, county public safety tax is the only one that is not coming in on budget. The other 2 are as of June. Cablevision, you go to the next highlighted one, says 77%, but that's only recorded quarterly, not monthly. So we expect that to change as the year goes on. The next one is occupancy permits, and it's at 68%. And I don't know if, Lisa, you want to add anything to this other than, I think it's, in my opinion, COVID related, in that the months that, you know, we couldn't actually do occupancy permits or really tackle it. I think that's what part of it is. And I think in July, we may have made up some of that already. Same with the others, the building permits. Those are like planning and zoning permits. And I don't know if Lisa wants to add, but again, I marked it down as COVID related. Same with trash pickups, COVID related. And then 4375 is ambulance fees. Talked to the chief. He had less runs during the COVID time. Therefore, ambulance fees slightly down. But I believe he said they've gone back up now since the end of June. Sale of, no, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Intergovernmental revenue, that's the money we get for the school crossing guards. And obviously, school's been closed, so we haven't been getting that revenue. However, we haven't been spending anything in salaries either. There's been no crossing guards. Weed eating, cutting, again, COVID related. Flip to the next page on that memo, the festival revenue. What some may think that revenue comes from anything we might make off of the festival. We don't make anything off the festival. That money comes from sponsors, donors, and we don't really have any since we're not going to have that big of that festival this year. Slate premium, which is on page 2, 4585. Again, come in later this year. So total general revenues are slightly over budget at 46% because they technically should be at 50%, and we have 46% left to collect in general revenues. General fund expenditures, which are on pages 2 through 6, all the departments are at or below budget, and that is due to the cost containments that everybody's been trying to keep within for the COVID period. On page 10, the total capital improvement revenues are slightly under budget at 55%. But again, there are a couple things, and I don't know if Dan's on, I think Dan's on, but we have some STP, the state project, highway projects that we are looking for reimbursements for. Again, total capital expenditure projects are under budget at 62%, and many lines are at 100% left to spend because of the cost containments put into place back in March or April or May. Total economic development, which is on page 12, and again on page 12 for the remember this is through June only because we're doing the 6-month report. We're not going to reach obviously that 3.8 million for the adopted budget, but I'm comfortable that we will meet what we need for the last interest payment and the principal payment out of that fund. Parks and Rec, page 13, their revenues are only at 90%, but again, that's due to COVID. And also their expenditures are at 86%. So as you can see, they may not have had revenues come in, but their expenses are also being kept down very well. And part of that was the part-time people that we did not pay during the COVID related time. Sewer improvement, one of the funds that's just right on budget and doing what we expected it to do. That's all I had for the June. I do not have in front of me because the printer wouldn't work. Let me see if I can find it on Shelley's. Here we go. Hang on. I don't have that the memo in front of me. Yeah, the memo for that's on board docs. Is board docs on here? Pulled up? Okay, good, thanks. That's what I need right there.
Go to this one. Let's go there. Here.
It won't go over there.
There you go.
Okay. That tab?
First one.
I'm sorry about this because I'm not at my desk. I'm at Shelley's desk. Here we go. And I need that. Thanks, Shelley. And then I need that one. What I was going to reference here was the sales tax memo update, which is dated 7/20, which is giving you the sales tax through July. What we collected that July 10th, I think. If you look at the general sales tax, the budget, 631,000. The COVID estimate was 347,000 plus. The month to date, we actually got a little over 600,000. Capital sales tax, COVID estimate was 123. We got 226,000, which as you see compared to the budget, that's slightly over for the month. Economic development sales tax, 266,000, and we got 258,000. And then Parks and Rec, again, slightly over budget for the month in that we got 265,000 plus and we budgeted 260. When I say budget, that's the actual budget, not the COVID estimate. That's the month to date. The next chart gives it to you year to date, January through July. And I would take you over to the far right column, and in general sales tax, those three were slightly over at 3%, capital slightly under at 1%, economic development overall slightly, I mean, not slightly, minus 37%, and Parks and Rec slightly under at 1%. So that's January through July, what we've collected in sales tax. For this portion, Bo, I think that's really all I had, unless you want to, was there something else you wanted me, or you want to get with the rest? The rest of it, most of it's history, just provided with you. And I think I saw the assistant finance director's job description on there.
Alderman Plufka, do you have a question for Karen?
I do have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. So a couple of these questions are going to probably betray my ignorance in this process, but how can we have a memorandum from July, dated July 20th, dated today, that provides, so in other words, since tomorrow there will be sales in the city of Brentwood and they will be recorded as July sales, the sales tax on those sales yet to happen in the next 10 days aren't still part of July. So July is not a complete, it's not a complete report of July's sales tax revenue, I would imagine, right?
Right.
Okay.
I only report to the board when I do report, like that's the money that came in July 10th for sale through June 20th, roughly.
Okay.
Not,
but yet,
I'm sorry.
But my point is that we still have 10 days left in the month, and according to your budget, we should be on track to receive $4.4 million in sales tax revenue year to date. I'm sorry, on the monthly part of it, I'm sorry, $631,000 in sales tax revenue in the month of July. We've received 600, which you describe as obviously 5% below budget, but there's still 10 days left in the month.
But that's not going to get recorded till August.
But it occurred in July. I mean,
because that's the way the state reports it to us, and that is the way the businesses report it to the state.
Okay.
You can't get an up-to-date minute. I mean, up to minute recording, because they just don't do it that way. They I believe they go through the businesses. I mean, say July, the month of July, they would go through July 20th, roughly, the first 3 weeks of the month, and then they have to record and fill out their tax reform and get it to the state by the end of July for them to record it on the books in August. Get it to us. We don't get that money from those sales tax through July 21st or 20th into the bank until August 10th, around August 10th.
Karen, I understand all that. So to boil that down, you're telling us that what'll be contained within the next report for the month of August will contain sales experience from the month of July.
Yes, and possibly months before, as seen in some of these reports from the state, that we being Bola and Dan Cook, where some businesses didn't report for 2 or 3 months in the year of 2019 until January, February, March, one of the months in 2020.
I understand.
Probably from an audit.
Okay, so so my question, my first real question is on page 2 of that July report, that July 20th report that you have, where you report year to date.
Right.
I'm assuming that the sales tax revenue in the first row, this is general sales tax revenue, that when a sale occurs in the city of Brentwood, the city of Brentwood is collecting a number of different sales taxes, portions of which are going to various places depending on the nature of that tax. But it's all being collected at the point of sale for that transaction. What I'm curious about is how can we, on general sales tax revenue that is 3% over budget, at the same time report that we're a third down on our economic development sales tax? Don't they track the same transactions?
No, they do track the same, but again, the general sales tax, the capital, and the parks and stormwater, they've been in existence prior to January 1st, 2020. And again, they're gonna probably include extra revenues from sales that don't cover the same time frame as the economic development sales tax, because the state does periodic audits. They go back and nail them, and that just all gets flown in, or flows into, and we get it at the same time.
When you create the budget for the sales tax revenue, you take the revenue you expect to collect in an entire year and you divide it by 12, and that becomes each month's budgeted sales tax revenue for general sales tax, correct?
Right.
So since you've already got that experience, as you say, for years and years and years, if you tack onto that a half-cent sales tax, why isn't it just simply a measure of math to add a half-cent to that same sales experience and come up with a budget for the economic development sales tax? And if that's true, how is it that we're so far off on predicting the economic development sales tax and so close to predicting our general sales tax?
I don't think I can answer your question. Maybe Bola can help out here, because first of all, the economic development sales tax budgeted figure, we worked closely with PGAV, Bola.
You're muted, Bola.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there is a time delay in the initial receipt of the economic development sales tax. I believe we tried to share that with the board back in May. So the notice went out to all the retailers within the city of Brentwood, giving notice that the city now has this half-cent sales tax. So we are still working through the delay in terms of catching up. And so what will happen at the end of this year is there will be 2 months of economic development sales tax that we will not collect until January and February of next year. But since this is over 25 years, by the end of the duration for which this tax is supposed to be collected, the city should be made whole. So
you're telling me that either, I mean, so from what I'm gathering from what you just said, either there are businesses that are not yet fully collecting the half-cent sales tax because it's new, or the collection of that sales tax and its reporting to the county or the state and its return to us in terms of revenue is taking a more circuitous route than the other sales tax revenue?
It's taken the same route. What we tend to find with any one of these sales tax is not every business reports it timely. There are instances where there is sales tax that were due from last year that should have been paid last year, that were never paid, that we're now collecting, or that we collected in May. So we might have instances of that still going on. So what we're doing to address that is, since the city has a contract with Dan Cook, with Cook and Riley, when he audits this every month, we're able to determine the laggers and then send a reminder to the Department of Revenue, the Missouri Department of Revenue, to put them on notice that there are businesses that aren't reporting theirs. Therefore, there needs to be a concerted effort for them to catch up.
So are you saying that the lagging is by the businesses reporting some sales tax and not others?
Yes.
On the same transaction?
That goes on.
Possible.
That goes on everywhere.
Okay. So my other question, thank you for that, first of all. My other question is to Karen. You just talked about it in your report about whether or not our expenditures are above or below budget, and that has to do with the situation that we're in right now, but also as to whether our revenues are on budget or not on budget. And it strikes me that even though our revenues are not linear, in other words, they're not incrementally the same each month. In other words, January's collections historically could be higher or lower than February's or March's or May's or June's or July's. And yet the approach that we take in these reports is that you simply take the overall revenue divided by 12. And I'm wondering if it might be more helpful. It certainly would be more helpful to me, I think, if it was something that was done at the committee level, perhaps, that when you make out these budgets and you report to us, instead of reporting just 1/12 of our revenue each month, whether we match up to that or are above and below it, it's much more helpful if somebody gives me the information that says, as compared to June of 19, this is what we did in June of 2020, or in July of 19 as opposed to July of 2020, and made that the actual budget figure. We still get to the end where we're budgeting a certain amount of revenue within a calendar year, but the monthly reports would track more closely what our actual revenue experience is. I'm sort of thinking out loud here that perhaps Ways and Means could take this up as a committee item to do that in the future. I think it would make it a lot more helpful as we go through these month after month. Those are the only two questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Just to kind of follow up on Alderman Pluska's comments or questions. So we have down as actual sales tax revenue for the general sales tax of $4.5 million. Now, Karen, does that number include sales tax on transactions that took place from November 20th to December 20th of 2019? Because those numbers we don't get until January 10th. And then the transactions that take place from December 20th through the end of the year, we're not going to get until February 10th.
Right.
And what I'm wondering, kind of to Bola's point, what I'm wondering is the transactions over the 40-day period at the end of 2019, are those reflected in that $4.5 million? I've got one.
There is a transaction that's done, a journal entry done by the auditors or the accountants for those 60 days. And it's a reversal of what they did the year before and what we actually got January, February, March. So it's accounted for in those numbers. But say, does it include November, whatever, 20th to December? Those numbers could include, and I've seen it, some numbers back from August of 2019, from January 2019. It just depends on when those stores reported their numbers. And especially if they got audited. That's why, mainly why capital, and they're all a higher, even percentage-wise, in the economic development tax, because the economic development tax are pure numbers. It's just what they've been collected since January 1 of 2020.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Karen on the projections through approximately June 20th of this year? Okay. Bola, is there anything else to take up under that item?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Mayor Dimmitt. So initially, Karen's been presenting these figures to the board. And at the last meeting, we indicated that we wanted to wait through September before the board would begin to consider whether we would release any of the cost containment. So that is still the recommendation at this point. However, you will note that in board docs under this item, an action item that I have included there is a request for the Board of Aldermen to consider the release of funds for a temporary accounting professional and the assistant finance director position. If you look at the PowerPoint presentation that we presented in May on page On slide 17, we have under administration, operating budget cost containment general fund. We had attributed the savings of 55,000. So part of that comes from a part-time finance position that we had, and the incumbent in that position left the city back in January. So we've been carrying a majority of that entire budget, which is about 29,128, and then part of the cost for the assistant finance director position. So at the Ways and Means Committee last week, I was asked what was the status, or what is the status of the audit. So we are behind, and there is a important need, critical need, to play catch up to get the audit done, at least no later, hopefully by the end of September. So we can easily bring on the temp. It will take at least 90 days to bring on the assistant finance director position. Therefore, I am requesting the release of the entire amount of $55,000 so that the city can begin the process of bringing in a temporary accounting professional to help the department catch up, and then to begin the recruitment of the assistant finance director position. If you will remember, in the budget, we did not budget for the entire year for the assistant finance director. It was only going to be half the year starting June, July. So we're at an ideal time to start that process. And if you look at the range based on the salary schedule, the range is from $69,268 to $95,789.93. So we hope to bring somebody in at the middle. And we're looking for someone that has significant governmental finance experience, and it is critical that we fill this position now.
Do you need a motion for that, Bola?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can we first get a motion to, I guess, release the $55,000 to fund the temporary accounting professional and the assistant finance director position for the remainder of 2020, then we can get into a discussion of it.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion by Alderwoman Sims, seconded by Alderman Plufka. Do we have any questions for Bola on this request? Okay. Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Everly,
Yes,
Alderman Gold,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Motion passes 7 yea, 1 absent.
Thank you. Bola, is there anything else under this portion? You're muted. There we
Thank you
go.
so much. No, that covers it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is item 8B, the Brentwood Bound update. Is Craig in attendance?
I am here.
Okay, Craig, you have the floor.
Thank you. Craig Schluter with Navigate Building Solutions. I'll be providing the Brentwood Bound update tonight for first starting with a few project updates. In regard to the demo bid package 2, this is the recent project that started a few months ago. The abatement work through all the buildings is currently completed. The contractor will begin demolition later this week. They'll be starting over near Breckenridge Industrial Court. What's exciting about this project is we will have a site camera that's tied to the internet. So all of you and the citizens of Brentwood can go on the brentwoodbound.org website and can watch all the progress as the buildings get demolished. So that link will be added to the website within the next 2 weeks. In regards to the flood mitigation phase 1 project, That project is out to bid. We had numerous pre-bid meetings that were held a few weeks ago. There were a lot of interested bidders, so we're really excited about that. The bid date is July 30th, which will allow us to bring a bid recommendation to you all at the August 17th Board of Aldermen meeting. Next, flood mitigation phase 2 design is underway. The 60% drawings will be received from Jacobs on August 31st. Deer Creek Greenway Connector design is also underway, and the 60% drawings will be received from Jacobs on August 14th. This will allow us to have a thorough review of the drawings with Great Rivers Greenway, and for the next step of the partnership that will hopefully allow Brentwood to receive additional $3 million within the next few years. That partnership agreement is still slated to be wrapped up by end of 2020, and getting these 60% drawings to Great Rivers Greenway by end of August is a next big milestone. In regards to the typical expenditures, starting with construction costs, total spend since the last Board of Aldermen meeting is $104,533.20. This is the demo bid package 2 construction work. Next is soft costs. Soft costs include flood mitigation, Manchester Road improvements, and Deer Creek Greenway Connector engineering design, project management fees, environmental surveys, bid advertisement, legal consulting, legal fees, traffic consulting, and Union Pacific consulting. Next is property acquisitions. Total spend since the last Board of Aldermen meeting is $180,000. And lastly is contingency. We currently have $9,060,829 in uncommitted contingency. That's my update. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Do we have any questions for Craig on the update? Okay, great. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have 9 items, and
Mayor Dimon,
yes.
we need to go back because Vanmark.
Oh, is that an Brentwood Bound update? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Vanmark Way presentation is next.
I missed that. Okay, yes. Okay, who's handling that? Is that Heather?
Yes.
All right, Heather. You're up. You're muted.
Good evening. My name is Heather Copeland. I'm a transportation project manager for TWM. I'm here tonight to talk about Vanmark Way. There's been further questions about why Vanmark Way isn't further south with the alignment. So this presentation will address that and provide further details on the financials of the project, as well as the huge coordination effort and the overall project schedule. You'll hear me, in addition to myself, there's J.R. Landeck. He's the branch manager for the St. Louis TWM office, and he is the MoDOT project manager for the Route 100 project. He will also be speaking tonight. These are the items we're going to run through tonight. March 2nd, 2020 board motion. We'll recap that. Then we'll look at the steps TWM took after the board motion. We'll do a schedule recap, budget, presentation recap, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Board motion on March 2nd, 2020 was to connect Vanmark Way by crossing Rogers Parkway, remove the area to the north of this crossing from the project scope and keep the existing playgrounds, and if possible, move the connection further south. You'll hear me in this presentation talk a lot about budget and schedule. As with any project, whether it's a home improvement project or a public works project, budget and schedule are key. You have to stick to the budget, you have to stick to the schedule. So you'll hear me talk a lot about that, but now I'm gonna dive into what did TWM do next after given the board's direction as we previously saw. Well, on March 4th, 4 engineers met to debrief on the board's motion and lay out the new connection to Dorothy Avenue through Rogers Parkway. We identified 2 new constraints from the board's motion to keep the existing playground and to move the connection further south. However, we still had the same constraints in place as before, namely schedule and budget. Those things did not change. The tunnel location, trail location, applicable standards that had to be met, the fire department coordination, utility service provider locations, right-of-way acquisition process and the timeline, the location of residential homes, location of apartment buildings, existing topography and soil profiles, urgent coordination with MoDOT, MSD, and the Brentwood Flood Mitigation Project. All those things are still in place. Now, you've heard me talk before about road slope, trail slope, and ADA, how those are really pressing issues on why Van Mark Way can't slide further south. So I'll set this up for you on what we were looking at before we dove into the analysis of looking at those further south alignments. The underpass trail elevation, so that's Rogers Parkway, right underneath Manchester Road. It was one of the first things that we set on the project. Building from there, it really drove all the other elevations. It drove the Van Mark Way elevation, where the Rogers Parkway Trail is, obviously, the hydraulics and the drainage pipes, and it affected all the roads around it, including Manchester Road, Dorothy, Mary Avenue South. Speaking of Manchester Road, by the time we set the size of the tunnel and the location or the elevation of the trail within the tunnel, we realized we would need to raise Manchester Road 5 feet in elevation at the underpass crossing. And changing this elevation, whether we go down or up now, would affect a dozen or more properties. We also spent extensive time coordinating with MoDOT 2.5 years ago after we set this underpass trail elevation, told them how much we would need to raise Manchester Road because it's their road, they maintain and own it. And we showed them what the impacts would be to the road itself and the properties around it. They agreed to that after a lot of back and forth. So that's something that, those are constraints. We can't move those things at this point. Right-of-way limits, that also doesn't change. We're in the process of acquiring additional right-of-way right now. I wanted to point out that the parking spaces at the apartment complex are not in the existing right-of-way, and we would need permanent or temporary construction easement to make changes on their property. And I really wanted to emphasize that this is a lengthy, costly, involved process. Going through the right-of-way acquisition involves negotiation, back and forth time. If we end up going to condemnation, that also takes quite a bit of time and up to 6 months or more. So this is not a quick snap your fingers and you get to purchase permanent or temporary construction easements. Roadway slope, talked about this before. There's a 15% max allowable per AASHTO. That's a national standard for public roads. And ADA standards. This is the law to provide accessibility to all trail users. Because there's federal funding in this project, as I'll talk about later, we have to meet ADA standards. That includes a 5% maximum running slope, a 2% maximum cross slope, and a max 2% slope in any direction, anytime level landings occur where pedestrian paths are intersecting. So that sets up where we were at as 4 engineers. We were sitting in the room talking about where to put Van Mark. So then we thought, okay, we know the slopes are going to be a problem. We know that going into this. So then what can we do? And we wanted to be really creative in the beginning just to see like what ideas were out there. We talked about lowering Van Mark Way, raising the tunnel up. Could we do a Van Mark Way overpass that swung up and over the trail and connected to Dorothy? Could we move the entrance to the apartment complex to the west side? These are all things that we looked at. But then we really marked out the raise the tunnel up, Van Mark overpass, and moving the entrance to the west just because of budget and schedule. So there was a resident who came up with a mock-up on a design of putting Van Mark Way to the furthest south point possible that wouldn't affect the tunnel. And you can see that there on the left. That's the mock-up that was presented. So we put that into CAD. You can see on the right side. With the pink circle around it. We put in just a road alignment. Looking at it from this plan view perspective, we noticed right away the skew of the road would be an issue. We've talked about that before. Also, drainage structures would be heavily impacted. There's a retaining wall that supports the trail that's in that thick red line here. That would also be heavily impacted by taking this route. These are just things that we noticed up front, but we wanted to take a deeper dive and see what the slopes look like. Perhaps we could solve those problems if we looked more at the slopes. So we took a cross section on Rogers Parkway at that point. And what we noticed right away was that we would need to lower Van Mark Way 4+ feet. We would need to redesign the existing retaining wall at the trail. We would need to rebuild the existing retaining wall at the apartment complex, and it would now be 9 feet tall. It's 5.5 feet tall right now at that point. The apartment building foundation, the building that sits back here off the screen, that would undoubtedly be affected. That's costly. And then finally, the nail in the coffin on this particular option was the freeboard is unacceptable. What that means is this pipe would have to drop. There's not enough elevation difference between where the pipe is and the road where the inlet is. So you would have water coming out of the inlets during rain events. MSD wouldn't permit that, so this is not feasible to build. So we looked at a second option. We analyzed a route that's a little further north. We took away the skew. We placed it out of the retaining wall and out of that intersection with the sidewalk and the trail. We just didn't want anything to do with that area. It wasn't feasible anyway. However, we noticed right away that although we got out of the retaining wall and some other issues, we were pointing this directly at property owners across the street. We went ahead and looked at the topography again. How does everything lay out? Where would the new pavement be? Where would the new pipes be, et cetera? Well, we saw we would need to lower Van Mark Way 3 feet, and that we would need to rebuild the existing retaining wall at the apartment complex. It's 5 feet at this point, so it would need to be 8 feet tall. The apartment building foundation would also be affected in this scenario. So you have to remove the existing retaining wall and build a new one. And the building is within 20 to 25 feet of the existing retaining walls. So we took a little closer look just because this path was further south. It didn't have a skew to it. It seemed to get out of the utility conflicts more. So we said, okay, if we have to rebuild the retaining walls, what does that look like? Well, we'd have to go with either a mechanically stabilized earth wall, a soldier pile wall, a soil nail wall. There's actually a lot of options we can go with, but we can't do a landscaping block wall. That won't work. It's too tall. Anytime you're over 8 feet in height, you got to go with a different type wall. So the aesthetics would also be very important in this because, again, those retaining walls that we're talking about on the apartment complex property, those are not Brentwood's property. So we would need to have some back and forth negotiation with the property owner to get the right aesthetics. We could go with this soil nail wall, but it's incredibly ugly. We could go with these soldier pile walls, but maybe that's not the look they want. In addition to that time sink that we'd be looking at, there's also the design cost to rebuild these retaining walls. You're looking at around $100,000 to do the geotechnical engineering and the structural engineering. And then construction costs somewhere between $30 and $100 per square foot, plus any decorative railings or fencing. So that puts us somewhere at $100,000 to $350,000 to rebuild those linear feet of retaining wall along the apartment complex, their property. Additionally, we saw, again, the parking spaces are not in right-of-way. We saw that putting Van Mark Way where that option 2 location is, about halfway in that section, that would, any modifications to the parking lot would trigger complex ADA ramps to get up to the leasing office. So today there is no ADA path visible from this area, from the ADA parking space. There only seems to be stairs. But again, because we have federal money in here in this project, and Van Mark Way is a part of it, it triggers this additional ADA ramp and path to get up to the leasing office. Also, we'd need to lower the entire parking lot area 3 feet. It wouldn't just be in a small section. 3 feet is quite a bit of grade to make up. So that would mean affecting all the parking stalls in front of the leasing office for a period of time at a minimum. We wanted to know, would it be a permanent effect of the parking stalls, or is it just a temporary effect while we rebuild the road? So we ran a fire truck analysis using a program called AutoTurn. And that, you can see from the graphic here that the fire truck access means removing 9 parking spaces that are owned by the apartment complex. And it's, so you can see the wheel path is this light purple on the south side, and it's this yellowy orange gold, I'll call it, on the north side. So you can see where those wheel path goes. We would need to take out those parking spaces and stripe it with a hatched parking to show that it's now fire truck access. So for the schedule, this means more time in the right-of-way negotiation process. Again, this orange dotted line is the right-of-way. This means the parking spaces are owned by the apartment complex. We need their buy off on the design that we would have here. And then budget. I talked with MoDOT's right-of-way negotiation consultant, OR Colon, and asked them what they thought the cost would be of removing these 9 parking spaces in front of the leasing office. And they said it would trigger a loss analysis for loss of access to the leasing office and to the apartments that are on either side of it. And the cost to cure would be between $1 million and $2 million. So lowering Van Mark Way and moving it further south, we just went through 2 options. So our southern route research showed for option 1, the hydraulics and the stormwater structures don't work. It wouldn't be permitted by MSD. For option 2, the budget is blown to remove parking spaces at the apartment complex and to add retaining walls. You're looking at somewhere between 1.2 and $2.45 million. So we made the engineering judgment that based on the available data, the current Van Mark Way design, where we had it up north where it is today, is a practical design that balances the constraints that we have. I wanted to also make everyone aware of the federal grants and the funding that are a part of this project. Brentwood has a vision in mind while they're executing this project along Manchester Road, and with the cost and the budget in mind, TWM worked with the city of Brentwood and looked at securing funding for the project. We leveraged the resources that we had, connections at MoDOT and within the federal grant funding system. We worked with city and stakeholders with the vision that they had in mind on how the corridor would look and operate. And we applied for 2 grants and were successful in getting those. March 2018, we applied for and received the cost share grant from MoDOT, and that's clocking into $3.8 million, which supports the right-of-way acquisition and the construction costs. And October 2018, we applied for and received a $1.2 million STPS grant, which is a federal grant. These 2 grants cover all the proposed scope on the Manchester Road Improvement Project. That includes the pedestrian underpass, the 12-foot wide Rogers Parkway extension to the south, the 10-foot wide shared use path on the south side of Manchester, project-wide ADA upgrades, the 5-foot wide tree lawns on both sides of Manchester, pedestrian lighting, landscaping, signing enhancements. This whole suite of improvements were all put down in paperwork in our grant applications that we turned in to MoDOT and to East West Gateway, who monitors the federal funding. So once the grants are approved, they use that documentation and say, okay, this is what you're going to build now. We agreed to this. We, the city of Brentwood and the federal funding mechanism, East West Gateway and MoDOT agreed that these are the things you're going to build and this is the schedule that you're going to stick to. So there are strings attached to these federal grants and the funding. 1, we have to build to ADA standards. It's a requirement. And 2, the project limits that we set on either side of Manchester Road and up and down on Dorothy Avenue and then Mary Avenue to the south, those are set. And the scope is set as well once the grant is approved. So not meeting these obligations means possibly forfeiting that money. Also wanted to pull back the curtain and talk about how much coordination effort is involved on this project and talk about the schedule, dive more into why is that set the way it is. So first, talking about the coordination effort on this, there's numerous key stakeholders. MoDOT is an organization that has over 5,000 employees. You don't just talk to one person to get things done. They have multiple departments with lots of people. So we have to regularly keep in contact with MoDOT Design, MoDOT Right-of-Way, MoDOT Construction, MoDOT Environmental, MoDOT Utility Locates for the ITS fiber that's running along Manchester Road, MoDOT Central Office for all the bidding. We also regularly communicate with St. Louis County Department of Transportation, Great Rivers Greenway, Metro/Bi-State, due to the bus stops that are along Manchester Road, and they also have an ITS fiber running along Manchester Road. We most certainly have regular communication with the Metropolitan Sewer District. As we'll talk about a little bit later, they now have a project that's going under Rogers Parkway. It's called the CSO Mary Avenue project that will reroute the sanitary sewer. In addition, we have multiple utility service providers. That includes Ameren, Spire, Missouri American Water, MCI, Charter, AT&T Distribution, AT&T Transmission. In addition, there's the Brentwood Bound Flood Mitigation Project to the south that we regularly coordinate with, and we'll talk about that some more too. Then there's consultants that are used by these agencies. There's adjacent property owners that are affected by any decision that is made on the project. And then of course, the number one key stakeholders for the Brentwood project is the residents of Brentwood and the business owners of Brentwood. Before I dive into who's controlling the schedule and where this is going, I wanted to run through kind of a dry and boring part, but the timeline of what happened by the time the clock started from the board's motion on March 2nd. What steps did TWM take specifically in order to make this new design, in order to fully put it into the Manchester Road or Route 100 plan set? So bear with me as I go through these line by line. March 4th, engineers meet and lay out a new connection to Dorothy Avenue. March 5th and 6th, we advise MoDOT right-of-way department on future changes to the right-of-way takings to stop right-of-way acquisitions in the area north of the tunnel. We advise 4 subconsultants that design is changing at Van Mark Way. CAD files are forthcoming and the scope will be revised. We advise MSD of design changes that will affect their design project. We advise MSD permitting that the current drainage design that we've already submitted will be changing. We advise 6 utilities of design changes in that area and ask them to halt utility relocation plans north of the tunnel. March 4th through the 13th, we work with Brentwood staff. We advise them that the southern route is not acceptable based on our analysis that I just went through, and we answer questions from them. March 6th through the 10th, based on the initial feedback from the city, MoDOT, MSD, utilities, subconsultants, TWM prepares their scope and fees to complete the design revisions within the schedule set by MoDOT, and then we submit it to the city for execution. March 13th through April 10th, TWM completed the draft 100% Route 100 plans, specifications, and cost estimate, and we submitted to MoDOT and to the city. April 7th, Brentwood and TWM execute the change order to complete the Van Mark Way design revision. April 20th, TWM sends conceptual design to the city and the fire chief for review and comments. April 28th, conceptual design is approved by the fire chief. No further comments on the design elements from the city. May 4th, TWM outlines Van Mark Way changes to MoDOT design, MoDOT construction, and MoDOT right-of-way departments. MSD and MoDOT notify TWM that MSD's CSO Mary Avenue project under Rogers Parkway will now be added to the MoDOT plan set, and that requires close coordination with the revised Van Mark Way design. So this was a new element that was thrown at us on May 4th. April 28th through May 29th, TWM removes the Mary Avenue North design from the Route 100 plan set. That was what was submitted to MoDOT April 10th. Instead, we added the Van Mark Way design into the plans. This adjusted the plan, the profile, the right-of-way lines, stormwater drainage design, cross sections, and requires recalculating quantities of construction bid items and scheduling those quantities. May 18th, TWM presents the Manchester Road Improvements Project update to the city's Board of Aldermen. June 1st, TWM submits all Route 100 right-of-way revisions to MoDOT, including temporary construction easement revisions at Van Mark Way. MoDOT restarts right-of-way acquisition process north of the tunnel. June 3rd, TWM submits a revised drainage and sanitary sewer plan to MSD for permitting. It was our 7th submittal. TWM reviews MSD's CSO Mary Avenue project, the one that was just added in May 4th, and we provided comments to the city on how that proposed design should alter based on the revisions at Van Mark Way. Later that night, TWM attends and presents at Brentwood Bound public meeting, highlighting the revised Van Mark Way design and providing project updates for the Manchester Road project. June 8th, MSD responds to that latest submittal, requiring final coordination between TWM and Jacobs for the Brentwood Bound flood mitigation project to complete permitting. June 10th, we received comments from MoDOT on the Route 100 draft final plans. June 6th through 30th, utility coordination for revised design occurs. We updated the MRI plans, the updated MRI plans that we already completed were sent to Ameren, Charter, Spire, AT&T, and Missouri American Water. Each utility revises their utility adjustment plans based on that new Van Mark Way design. June 11th through July 10th, TWM completes the design plan revisions based on MoDOT review comments. The revised base CAD files are blasted out to the 3 affected subconsultants so that they can complete their plans. And then we come to today, the period that we're in right now, July 13th through August 10th, TWM to complete required coordination with subconsultants, utilities, MSD, MoDOT to compile and submit the Route 100 final 100% plans, specifications, and estimate to MoDOT. So as you can see, it's been a very hurried timeline, moving quickly to coordinate with all of these entities, make sure everyone's aware of the new updated design, and be ready to submit to MoDOT by August 10th. Some final schedule notes. The project schedule is driven by the MoDOT project J6S1718. The right-of-way negotiation and the acquisition is being performed by MoDOT. The construction inspection and contract administration is also being performed by MoDOT. These are in association with MoDOT. Brentwood is receiving these services at no cost. So MoDOT is really driving the schedule. They have the main project, J6S1718. Brentwood has a project associated with that. Their project number is now a MoDOT project number, J6S1718B, as in Brentwood. So the Brentwood enhancements on Route 100, including the tunnel area and the Van Mark Way improvements, those are all tied in with the MoDOT project J6S1718 and that contract is being let in combination with the overall MoDOT project that extends from Big Bend to Kirkwood. So if Brentwood makes a project decision that doesn't allow the schedule to be met, then all the improvements and the associated grant monies are in jeopardy. That $5 million again is in jeopardy if we don't meet the schedule, which is set by MoDOT. Getting back to the budget, every project, a home improvement project or a public works project or a city budget, everyone needs to design to the budget, build to the budget. Moving that connection further south could add up to $2 million plus, including construction and right of way. So in our engineering opinion, we didn't even bring it up. We didn't go into great detail with the city because we felt like it was a non-starter based on blowing the budget and blowing the schedule. Now I'm going to turn it over to J.R. Landeck. He is the branch manager for the St. Louis branch of TWM. He's also the MoDOT project manager. He's a representative for MoDOT on the design portion. And he's going to talk about how the Van Mark Way connection affects the overall project, and he'll do a recap of what we talked about.
Okay, thank you, Heather. I wonder if I could get video turned on. I'm not able to. All right, there we go. Thank you very much. Yeah, again, thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. As she mentioned, I'm the MoDOT project manager on the consultant side of the project. Currently, the project is almost miles long in length, extends from Maplewood to Kirkwood and encompassing 6 different municipalities in the corridor entities. So with that said, Heather mentioned balancing the constraints on the project. A lot of the things that we balance and looked at, obviously, were the budget and scope. But with that in mind, some of the laws and regulations and guidelines that we have to adhere by, not only because it's federal fund, but as part of our engineering licensure, I guess, if you will. You'll see here we've got listed ADA, ProWag, FHWA, American, and AASHTO, along with some of the other local guidelines and regulations that we have to follow. And then others throughout the corridor as well, like St. Louis County have some guidelines that we have to adhere to. So the main one that we're adhering to is the roadway and slope, the road slope and trail slope that Heather mentioned throughout the presentation. And then we also have to adhere to the fire department. Some of the things that we had talked about throughout the development of this relocation is the fire department. The fire department has to have access to this facility. There's large buildings here, You know, there's quite a few residents, and they need to have, the emergency vehicles need to have access. And having that, the point of access and the central location, having a fire truck or emergency vehicle traverse through the parking lot, it does take time. And seconds matter. Seconds matter, you know, in saving lives and helping people. And then on top of that, we also have moving vehicles that enter and exit the facility. And typically you'd use a, you know, what we call a single axle vehicle, an SU-40 moving truck to move residents in and out. There also is a need for a larger vehicle, a semi truck and trailer, which is a WB67 vehicle. And there's other vehicles as well, but we did analyze those at those locations, as Heather mentioned before. And on top of that, we also have some other engineering controls, the known unknowns. We looked at quite a few different scenarios. One that brings up a red flag, you know, as Heather mentioned in the beginning of the south access point, was the building foundation. You know, we're not certain if that building is, you know, a slab on grade with a 4-foot footing, or if it's a trench and cap. You know, any impacts that we start excavating near that building in our zone, our threshold zone for constructing any type of retaining wall, could potentially impact the building at that location. Along with utilities, Heather mentioned that. You know, that's always you know, a lot of coordination there to get them. As she mentioned, you know, we had them halt any relocation. Not happy at that point. You know, the utilities aren't happy because they have boots on the ground. I mean, you guys know they're out there right now moving, you know, gas, Ameren's out there, all the utilities are out there moving, you know, their facilities. The right-of-way negotiations, there's approximately 250 parcels along this corridor. You know, Brentwood has a pretty good chunk of those that are impacted. However, the MoDOT is acquiring property from 213. So that's a large task in itself. Along with the ADA, a little bit concerned about making any type of alteration to the apartment complex itself, having access from the accessible parking stalls up to the leasing building, and then and any of the other potential apartments within the facility. Drainage, that's, you know, everybody knows that drainage is a problem in there, hence flood mitigation project, and trying to manage both the flood mitigation and the Manchester Road project to minimize any drainage impacts in the future. And then we also have other impacts. Once you start modifying the profile grade or the running slope of the roadway and or trail, you're going to impact other entities or other items, you know, on the design and or construction. You know, moving the trail a couple inches here may impact something 2 or 3 feet at a different location, and it's all in our design, you know, in our conceptual side of things, you know, and to kind of go back or go to the schedule and coordination there. You know, the right-of-way, MoDOT's pushing through acquiring these parcels, and they're having some difficulties, but having quite a bit of success getting some of these parcels, and we need to be out there ready to go when these people are ready to sign. And MoDOT, they are pretty much covering, you know, most of the administrative costs for acquiring these parcels, for the additional properties, if you will, required for the Brentwood section, the enhancements in the tunnel and that. So that's definitely a cost savings and timing savings for the project. And then to go back to the balancing the constraints here, we have the budget. You know, we have a budget in mind, we have a scope for the project in mind, and you know, as Heather mentioned, we were able to secure, you know, $5 million in federal funds, and likewise on the STPS grant, we were able to utilize the cost share funds in order as part of the match for that. So that's very exciting to be able to capitalize money you've already received or already are programmed in order to utilize that as part of your match. That's very unique, and just the way we tailored it in order to do that. And then with that in mind, the budget scope, you know, the community, stakeholders, everybody has this vision in mind. what the corridor should look like. And that was portrayed to us, and we gathered that information and were able to keep within the budget and the scope of the project. So I think that's all that I have at the moment to present. I don't know, I'll turn it back over to you, Heather and or Craig.
Great. With that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Yeah, if we could just go ahead and get rid of the screen share, Heather. This is David, incidentally. First of all, thank you for that. I think it was a very thorough presentation. Do we have any questions from, the board will remember, and the public might, that will be watching this. This is back in front of the board. It's not requesting any, we're not asking any, for any thing from the board. This was simply a result from the board's request at the last meeting to give some more information from TWM as to their recommendation to keep, and I see Alderman Pluska there, to go ahead and to keep the access from Van Mark Way to Dorothy that was presented to this board over the last few months. With that, Alderman Pluska, you're muted. You're muted, yep.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Heather, if I could ask you to go back to, this is the first time we saw that collection of slides. It was not in the packet of materials that we had prior to tonight. Could you go back to the slide that starts with road slope?
Sure, give me a second. This one?
I believe so. Yeah. It had something to do with, you had mentioned at this point that you were going to have to gain, to do anything of the like of a design that we had talked about, moving that connection south would have required gaining an easement from the apartment complex to lower the grade of the height of the street or the parking area in one design 3 feet, in another design 4 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so what steps did you take? I mean, you had said, at least you said it, and I thought it was in the slide too, but maybe it's not. You said that that's a time-consuming and very expensive process. Is that based on just your experience generally, or did you actually engage Mr. Mills in a conversation about gaining an easement from him for that precise change?
MoDOT is the one who's performing all of the right-of-way acquisition on the project. I have not had a discussion on this particular design with anyone from Mills property.
So the concern you expressed about the gaining the easement is based on your experience in the past of that process being expensive and time-consuming?
Yeah, we are going through that process right now with MoDOT. Pretty much every single property. I know JR can speak to this as the project manager for the MoDOT, the overall project, the 270 parcels. He is in constant communication.
Heather, let me stop you there if you don't mind. I'm really only asking about the easement that would have had to do with the Mills, the owner of the apartment complex, insofar as the changes that we're talking about as a possibility. I'm not talking about the other 249 easements, which I'm sure are complicated and time consuming. I just didn't know whether or not you or the representative from MSD that's here, or MoDOT, that Mr. Mills had come to a public meeting of the Board of Aldermen and indicated in that public meeting that he would provide an easement at no charge to do anything of the type that we're talking about if it resulted in the connection being farther south than it was on the design that's currently the design. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Again, the right-of-way acquisition, any sort of donation process is all being handled by MoDOT. That's not, we handle the design.
Okay.
Not handling the negotiation process.
So let me ask you another question about the right-of-way issues and the changes that would have been affected. On one of the slides, and it might be the next one after this one, where there's a number of lines being drawn that demonstrate the right of way that would have been required had you gone ahead and made any kind of a design that pushed the entrance or the connection as far south as what option 1 and option 2 talk about. And I'm curious as to whether the right of way, the perimeter of that right of way, would have, I can't really, I'm using my phone, so I apologize, but did it just extend to the edge of the parking lot? Or the parking spaces? Did it track that line, the new right of way?
This is the existing right-of-way line. Because
Right.
we didn't accept this design or even pitch it to the city, we didn't go into any sort of right-of-way analysis of where would the slope lines be. That's usually how we lay out what right-of-way lines we need. Is doing.
No, actually, my question is this. You made mention of the fact that you had a picture up there that talked about, that demonstrated or depicted a set of stairs going to their leasing office. And you indicated in passing that that set of stairs is not ADA compliant as it exists right now. And you supposed that if we did this option, that we would somehow have to make it ADA compliant. And I'm curious as to why that would be. If the right of way doesn't extend beyond the edge of the parking lot, how is it that an already non-compliant sidewalk would somehow have to be made compliant with ADA, even though the right of way doesn't extend to that property itself?
So Heather, I can go ahead and take this if that's okay. So what happens here, once we start excavating into the existing retaining wall here, you see in the photograph, this becomes an alteration. We're altering the parking stalls themselves and then the access to the building. Currently, we're not aware of an ADA compliant access route. The stairs are not an ADA access route. It'd have to be some kind of ramp with level landings, which would in turn zigzag back and forth on this property. This property was put in before those requirements were mandated. And once we start modifying these parking stalls and locations, that's when it kicks in. It's based on federal requirements and or ADA laws. If the Miles property wanted to do some changes to their building, like the parking here, that would trigger that. It depends on the functionality, the function and classification of the building, but they do have accessible units within the property itself, requiring that to kick in.
And
it's an alteration.
I understand. I appreciate your response. The third question I had, the last question I had to do with Heather had said during her presentation that there would undoubtedly be affecting the foundations of these buildings, probably the one in this picture and then the one that's immediately to the left of this picture. And I think you had said, sir, during your part of the presentation that you thought that there was at least the possibility of disrupting the foundation. Without knowing the type of foundation that these buildings sit on, that's pretty much, you're guessing at that, aren't you, at this point?
Yes, to some degree, but based on familiarity with this type of construction and or buildings and information we've received, there is a zone that once you start excavating close to the building, it'll require structural engineering, like Heather had mentioned, some additional geotechnical advisement and engineering. When we looked at this, we talked about, okay, you could temporary shore, but then again, once you start getting into the zone to support that retaining wall, to support the soil behind there, it becomes more complex. It becomes very complex. And
so would the property owner be able to decline such additional investigation? I mean, if he signed whatever waiver would be applicable, could he waive your responsibility to do that? Or is that something that's really mandated by statute and can't be changed by him?
It's not a responsible engineering design. If you don't take the foundation, I can't see in your signing and doing a set of plans that doesn't take the foundation of the building into account.
Very good. Those are the questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Plufka. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Alderman Gould.
Yes, thank you. Heather and JR, I do appreciate the thoroughness and the time you spent to go through all that. I know that you felt that some of it might have been boring, but in this case, I think hearing how the sausage is made is probably a good thing. So I had the same question a little bit on the ADA path, and I'd like a little bit more clarification on, aren't we already lowering the grade on the existing section of Van Mark Way, and does that affect us needing to trigger and make an ADA compliant ramp, or is that only because we would be affecting the retaining wall?
Yeah, we're not even going outside of the curb lines on Van Mark Way. We're building a modified curb that's going to be 12 inches tall. It'll have more steel in it than a regular curb, so that it can take that additional height. A regular curb is 6 inches, is going up to 12 inches. So it does not trigger any ADA compliance because it's strictly within the roadway.
Okay, thank you. The second question that I had was in regards to drainage. We talked a lot about drainage. And I don't know if you've been on that on Van Mark Way or on Dorothy during a heavy rain like we've had recently, both of which have rivers coming out of them. And right now, there's a tremendous amount of water that comes from Van Mark Way that doesn't affect Dorothy at all. And it just keeps going down to Manchester, which is obviously an issue that we're trying to avoid. How are we avoiding the drainage from all of that property to the east of the apartment buildings? I'm sorry, the west of the apartment buildings. How are we mitigating that, all that water coming down and adding to Dorothy and creating a even bigger problem than we already have with flooding and ponding and all of that that we already have coming down from that grade?
Sure, we're installing new inlets on Dorothy Avenue, and then we're installing new inlets on Van Mark behind the retaining wall for the tunnel. And those are able to capture, that's why the hydraulics were so important. We couldn't move the connection further south. It was, I call it blowing up the hydraulics. You don't have the freeboard, the tailwater elevation that's coming out of the detention pond to the south. I know I'm using engineering terms, but those things all bound our hands. We can't go further south because basically the water in the pipes doesn't work during storm for making that further south connection. But with the design that we have in place today, we're putting in additional inlets that's capturing that water and effectively funneling it south as it does today, but we're putting it into the big detention pond that's being built with the flood mitigation project. And it eventually makes its way to an overflow structure, which goes into the creek.
Okay, so the water collection that you're going to have on Van Mark Way is going to be near the tunnel, correct?
Yes. So there's a slope that goes down towards Manchester today that will remain existing for that portion of Van Mark. It's still going south. So we're putting in new inlets there behind the tunnel retaining wall.
Okay, so you're, because what I was concerned about is the water not even making that turn to go south with the current plan where it cuts straight across. All of that water from the upper parking lot is then going to, path of least resistance going to go straight. But you're saying that the grade is still going to be that it's going to force most of the water to stay south on Van Mark Way and go there, not be deposited onto Dorothy.
It'll be a balance between the two. As I mentioned, we're installing new inlets on Dorothy Avenue as well. So we've been able to make that work with, it's obviously part of our analysis. The water is being captured efficiently. We turned in our submittal to MSD. They approved it based on final coordination with Jacobs. So yes, we have efficiently captured stormwater for the design storm that we were required to design for.
And are they planning to have additional stormwater, any more storm capture north of the existing Van Mark Way entrance to capture some of the water from Dorothy North?
No, our scope ends at the playground, essentially. That's where the trail will now tie in. So that's where the project will end. No new structures are north of the playgrounds. Everything we're doing is on Dorothy Avenue south of there and Van Mark Way south of there.
Okay.
Anything else, Alderman Gould?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Anybody else have any questions for either Heather or JR or Craig on the explanation?
Alderman Lockmiller has his hand up.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Steve.
Okay. Heather, I just have a question with the picture that's up right now. In order to do any of these changes to the wall, to the ADA accessibility, the dropping of the parking lot, does that require acquisition of those lands from the owner, or can they be done with construction easements that he might grant?
The plan would be to get construction easements if Brentwood were to choose to go this route, either a permanent easement if necessary for the walls, although we would guide you to try to do a temporary construction easement so that the Mills property would continue to own those walls, and it would just be basically renting the land in order to construct the improvements.
And that's usually a financial arrangement then with the property owner to get those easements?
Correct. So the design plans would, again, outline those slope limits. They would set easement limits based on the construction slopes. And then that's when the right-of-way negotiation would occur with the owner. Like, hey, here's what we need. Here's the land we need from you, whether it's an easement or a temporary easement in order to build these improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Heather. Thank you, JR, for your time and your presentation. If we can get our screen back. Great, thanks. I'm sorry, somebody else?
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if I could ask Craig a question. I got dropped during his presentation.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Craig, you're still available?
I am.
Craig, I was wondering on the your presentation, when you get down to the bottom there, where you got total of 85 million we're looking at now.
Yes.
Is that increase that we see from time to time reflective of grants?
So that increase is specifically the additions to the project based on the MSD agreement. MSD is reimbursing Brentwood to do a new horseshoe sewer and also put some pipes around the lake that they call CSO Mary Avenue. So there's two separate projects that they are reimbursing Brentwood to do. That increases the overall budget. And the third item was you all approved the Deer Creek the Deer Creek Trail. That's a trail that goes through the flood mitigation phase 1. That was an additional project that was approved in January, and that added approximately $1.5 million to the budget. So those three items were the result of the increase in budget.
Okay.
And,
so when grant monies are made available, how is that treated?
So probably the best thing to do right now, none of the money has actually been received. We're going to be receiving money at various increments over the next 6 months to the next 2 years. So when that money gets received, it's going to essentially be additional contingency. And then as we talked about last December, once we get through some of the high risk components of this project, which are the bid that's coming up on July 30th, which is the flood mitigation bid. Also, when we conclude the property acquisitions, we're going to start bringing some of those wish list projects back to the board next spring of 21. And then that way you all can decide if you want to do some of those wish list projects like the playground, the water play area, the event lawn building. To answer your question directly, it's just going to sit as contingency funds until you all decide what to do from that point on.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Alderman Lockmiller, to help you out, in June, I put together a detailed presentation on this, and it really goes through all the different specifics and numbers. So I can, that's on the Brentwood, Brentwoodbound.org website.
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, pull that up. And then if you have any questions, let me know. I'll help you out.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we have nothing else. Then we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Any of the aldermen wish to have any of the items from the consent agenda removed? Can we vote on them all at one time? Okay, seeing none, can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
we got a motion by somebody and seconded by Alderman Lockmuller. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please, Shelley.
Alderwoman Ebeling,
Yes.
Alderman Gold,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmuller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie is absent. Say 7 yay, motion passes.
Great, thank you, everybody. Next on the agenda, we have no old business. We will move on to item 11. We have 3 matters under new business. The first is bill number 6293. Can we get a first reading by title only, please, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, sir. As soon as I get my technology straightened out here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Bill number 6293, an ordinance of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a third amendment to real estate contract with Executive Associates Limited, liability company, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause.
Okay, thank you. Bola, are you handling this, or is Craig, or?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can.
So I've been told to turn down my volume. So in summary, the city would like to give MSD and executive associates a little bit more time so that they can sign this agreement. Earlier on today, we thought that MSD had already signed it and we're contemplating removing this item from the agenda, but we were told they need another 24 hours. So we expect that by the end of this week, this agreement will be signed by MSD and executive associates, but in the event that they're not, asking for 200 days instead of 90, or asking for 90 instead of 200 days, or vice versa, is what we're asking for. So we just want to give them a little bit more time to finalize this agreement.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Bola on this request? Bill 6293. Okay, we would like to have a second reading on that bill tonight. So if I could get a motion for a second read by our city attorney, I would greatly appreciate it.
So moved.
Great. Motion unanimously made and seconded by Alderman Lockmuller. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read by title only of Bill 6293, please?
Bill number 6293, second reading and consideration for adoption, an ordinance of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a third amendment to real estate contract with Executive Associates Limited Liability Company, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause.
Thank you. Can we get a motion to perfect Bill 6293 into ordinance form?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderwoman Sims, seconded by Alderwoman O'Neill. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Alderwoman Ebeling,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmuller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Motion passes 7 yay. Bill number 6293 becomes ordinance number 4930.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 11B, bill number 6295. Can we get a first reading by title only, please, Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 6295, first reading, an ordinance amending ordinance number 4132 pertaining to a conditional use permit for property numbered 1921 South Brentwood Boulevard.
Thank you. Lisa, if you're still around, can you want to handle this?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So the public hearing that was earlier this evening was for consideration of an amendment to amend the conditional use permit for O.B. Clark's located at 1921 South Brentwood Boulevard. The restaurant O.B. Clark's was first granted permission to operate back in 1999, and they had to receive a conditional use permit to operate the restaurant. And then fast forward in 2008, O.B. Clark's had petitioned the city in order to amend the original CUP to build a deck that is currently on the existing structure, and that was approved. And the most recent request then by the co-owners of O.B. Clark's was to go back and amend the CUP again. And when the CUP was approved for the deck addition, as part of the condition of approval, there was a specific condition that said condition of approval to construct the deck addition was that no outdoor speakers, television, or music associated with the use of the deck was allowed. So this latest request to amend the CUP would be to roll back that condition of approval and to allow the co-owners to install 3 TV sets on the existing deck. There would be no volume, no audio emitted from the TV sets. It's just going to be for visual appearance only. There's nothing else that's going to change about the operations to O.B. Clark's. There's no other changes proposed for any additional improvements. This is just specifically to install the 3 TV sets on the deck.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Lisa? Alderman Pluska. You're muted before you get going too far. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we'll get you, Pat.
Sorry. Thank
Alderman
you.
Pluska, there you go.
Lisa, when notice of this one on the agenda, both with P&Z and tonight, were there notices that this was on the agenda sent to folks on Lawn Avenue, those who are immediately adjacent to O.B. Clark's?
There were 2 sets of notices that were sent out to all property owners within 300 feet. The first notice would have went out prior to the May meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission, of which the commission members addressed it and voted 9-0 to recommend approval of this amendment. And then the second hearing notice went out prior to the June public hearing that was at your board meeting in June. And then that public hearing was held, it was open, and then it was continued to tonight. So there was not another need legally to put another notice out for the public hearing continuation.
Can I ask, because I don't see it reflected in the notes, did anybody show up electronically or however they would have done that to either P&Z or I don't recall if anybody showed up to the public hearing, which didn't happen in June?
There was no one that came to the June public hearing. Back in the May Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we had 2 people that had submitted comments, written comments through email. One was in support. It was the property or the business owner of Mattress Firm across the street. And then we had 1 resident that had submitted comments in opposition. And she in turn also was able to participate at the May Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and still stated her opposition. And it was more or less just that she still thought it would consider a disruption to the neighborhood.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderwoman Ebeling.
I just wondered if there was any kind of a study as to the noise that's going to cause. I know it's not supposed to be any noise from the TVs, but oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Can you hear me?
You're fine. I can hear you
okay.
still. Yeah, you're good.
But, you know, if you're watching sports on television and there's a bunch of you out there drinking, you're going to make some noise. And I just wondered how that was going to affect the neighbors. I know there's not any real close anymore. Just if anybody studied that or if they heard anything about it or anything.
Sure.
So
Lisa?
I'm sorry, Mayor. There was
No,
no noise study that was required, and I wouldn't think to do that at this point in time since there hasn't been a problem that's even presented itself. If there does become any issue with excessive noise, we do have a noise ordinance, if you will, in our code, and we would handle it through code enforcement.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure. Alderwoman Sims.
that kind of gets onto the question I had. Lisa, they are subject to noise ordinances now, correct?
Correct.
So, and even if people are outside enjoying the game, they still have to follow the law, and we have a noise ordinance and a procedure for, ferreting out violations, right?
Right. That would be for really any outside establishment or any kind of noise that would be emitted from any of our commercial areas.
Okay, thanks. That was my question.
Alderman Gould. I think you had your hand up.
Yes. Lisa, can you clarify and just make sure that I'm reading this correctly, that the conditional use permit is only to the TV sets and video only feed, right? It wouldn't open up further, precedent to have them be able to have a band out there or anything like that, right? This is just relegated to the TV sets. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Plufka?
Well, and just to confirm, this does not change the requirement that the patio closes at 10 o'clock on weekdays or weekday nights and at 11 o'clock on the weekends, right?
Correct. There's no changes to the hours of operation.
Very good. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we would also like to, or the applicant would also like to have a second read on this motion tonight, if at all possible. With that, anybody on the board care to make a motion for a second reading?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Alderwoman Tyson, seconded by Alderwoman Sims for a second read. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of Bill 6295 by title only, please?
Your Honor, do we have to vote on that? Or is
For
it
the
just
second read?
moved? Is it just moved and seconded?
Well, I mean, we normally do. We normally just.
A vote on the motion for second reading would be in order, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you, Alderman Pluska. All in favor of the second read for 6295, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, me.
Okay, so the motion carries 6-1.
Yep.
So with that, can we get a second reading of Bill 6295, please?
Bill number 6295, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance amending ordinance number 4132 pertaining to a conditional use permit for property numbered 1921 South Brentwood Boulevard.
Can we get a motion to perfect Bill 6295 in an ordinance form, please?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Alderwoman Sims and seconded by Alderman Plufka. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderwoman Ebling,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Motion passes 7 yea, 1 absent. Bill number 6295 becomes ordinance number 4931.
Thank you. The final item under new business is Bill number 6296. Can we get a first reading by title only, please?
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin. I apologize, but due to a communication failure on my part, we have not prepared a bill text, a formal bill. The substance of the regulations was circulated and will be folded into a bill with a proper title and designation and an acting clause. But because of my failure, I did not prepare the ordinance for first reading tonight. But that should not inhibit the discussion of the substance of the regulations to be considered.
Okay. All right. So do we still go ahead and take a first read then on that, Kevin?
I would think it's there for the subject is ripe for discussion, but the bill will be read at the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Who's taking this one, Bola?
Christine?
Christine is taking this. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Christy Wilson. I'm with Horner and Schifrin. I think I've spoken to you guys previously about the stormwater infill ordinance and the review that we've done, we started in the fall of 2019. We looked at the city's current ordinances and then looked at what changes might need to be implemented to help control what we're calling infill development. That's the redevelopment of lots from their current use or additions that might create any additional impervious area that could increase stormwater runoff. We visited a couple sites throughout the city to understand the issues that were occurring with home additions or complete rebuilds, and to understand the changes in the stormwater that could possibly impact the neighboring properties. We've taken this before the Public Works Committee several times, and we made some recommendations for a proposed stormwater infill ordinance. And based on city staff and the committee's recommendations, we've come to the final proposal that any property that exceeds 200 square feet in impervious area and also requires an ARB request will trigger these stormwater infill requirements. And any stormwater runoff that's generated as part of the infill development will be controlled to the 1.14 inches of rainfall. And that is consistent with MSD stormwater control as well. We looked at other options of having no increase at all up to a 20-year storm, but we felt that was prohibitive to any development within the community. So these requirements would apply to all development, whether it be residential, commercial, and anything that, like I said, is over 200 square feet and requires an ARB review. So the purpose of that is to exclude things like patios, driveways, things like that. Although those do generate stormwater runoff, we're trying to prevent that from being something burdensome to the community.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Christina or anybody else? I guess Steve took this up at the senior committee, took this up, the Public Works.
Yeah, for several months, and thanks to the help of Christine and Lisa, we're able to put together what, at least the draft that's before you, as well as the best management practices. I don't know about some of the other aldermen, but I get complaints all the time about some of the water that freezes on sidewalks, running into other people's yards. And, you know, as we tear down these smaller bungalows and maybe 900 square feet and throw up a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot home, you've got all that impervious area under roof. You've got now sump pumps where you might not have had them before. You got MSD disconnecting all the gutter work and downspouts to dump onto lawns, and you still got the same size green space. So that water's all got to go somewhere, and all we're trying to do is, with these new builds and additions, try to create a situation where we can offer the developer, the homeowner, through the best practices manual, ways to retain that water and have it run off slowly and hold it onto the actual property itself. It's not a perfect situation, but it's a big bite at this, and I just hope everybody's behind it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Alderman Gould.
Yes, hi. Steve, thanks for that background. If this were to pass, does this affect existing, is it retroactive to people who have existing petitions to ARB, and or is it anything moving forward from the motion? Any building that is going on right now or at ARB in consideration, does it affect them as well?
Kevin, that might be a question for you. I don't know.
It would not affect Any project for which a permit has been issued or approval has been granted, this would be applied as a process for reviewing new applications
Okay.
and
So a
permitting, reviewing and
a
permitting.
pending application would not be subject.
It would not.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Alderman Gould?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So we're just going to kind of treat this as a time for a first reading. Even though we're not doing a first reading, we can take this up at the next meeting. But I think it's probably best if Christina plans on maybe attending the next one as well, because there might be some questions after the board's had an opportunity to read the text of the bill. But with that, do we have any other questions about this? Yes, Alderwoman Tice.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment that this, as a member of the Public Works Committee, we've been working on this for nearly a year. This water runoff is the single largest complaint that I have received in the year plus that I've been an Alderwoman, and I'm really pleased that the board is looking at this issue so carefully and thoroughly, and would like to thank all involved for getting it to this point.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that. This was, this has been a problem, like Alderwoman Tice said, since beginning of time, essentially, at least since 1919 of Brentwood. But every single elected official, us and those that came before us, had to deal with this. And as Alderman Lockmuller said, with there being more additions putting on existing structures and then tear downs, it creates a bigger and greater problem with the runoff. And I've hats off to the Public Works Committee, because this is not the most exciting topic to deal with. No offense, Christina, but that's just the way that it is. And that committee did a terrific job of really trying to hash this out and figure out the nice balance between homeowners and the neighbors, because that's really what we're trying to deal with. So thank you very much, the Public Works Committee, and Christina, for your work. Okay, if we don't have anything else on that, then we will just move on to the last item, which is citizen comments. Anybody in the public care to address the board? Now is the time to do so. Again, just let Shelley know, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes. Just state your name and address, please.
Mr. Matt Bowman.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Matt.
Okay, as you all know, I'm Matt Bowman. I live at 2642 Dorothy Avenue. I just have a few things to say about tonight's meeting. Needless to say, I am disappointed with TWM's response. I am still confused as to how 4 engineers sat in a room and came up with a plan that aims a slope street at a residence. No one has ever answered our plan how the Dorothy plan is the best and the safest plan. That said, we feel the Dorothy plan needs to be taken off the table. Now, I'm sorry, we've heard a lot of talk about budget and time issues, and they're pressing, but keep in mind, they're only pressing because the board decided to switch from a safer and nearly 100% complete plan to a flawed and unsafe plan. Now, we currently have a change.org petition, which has 707 signatures. I'm sorry, 770 signatures, 90 from the Brentwood area, and they're from all wards, not Ward 3, all of them, and nearly 150 from the St. Louis area. These 770 people looked at TWN's plan and determined that it is unsafe and unfair. This includes residents who live on Mary Avenue and would be affected by the Mary plan, but they are against the Dorothy plan because it is quite simply unsafe and unfair. Also, I'm sorry, I lost my. Also, why would they also be against this plan? As I said, they see that it is unfair and unsafe, but they also wonder, if Brentwood would do this to us, what would they do to them? What if a business wants to expand and buy out the houses near them? We found out last Ward 3 meeting that Brentwood is nearly doing the same thing to another residence who are now facing the new Executive Park apartment entrance. An entrance that is aimed at a single home, taking away their parking, subjecting them to noise and light pollution, constant noise and light pollution, and lower property values. So needless to say, people see this and they worry about what Brentwood would decide to do to them. Now, sorry, Heather's plan was very detailed, but no considerations were given to the residents of Dorothy in regards to the safety and quality of life. Have Heather and JR been to 2642 Dorothy? I would love for them to come by and explain how this is the best and safest solution. Do they fully understand how this plan affects us? I think they don't. I think they look at their drawings and are completely unaware of how their plan truly affects people. That said, I hope the board will listen to the residents, the over 90 residents of Brentwood, and permanently get rid of the Dorothy plan, because we are not going away. We will continue to tell the residents of Brentwood of how the city is threatening our quality of life, safety, and property values by moving ahead with this flawed plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else?
I don't see any others.
Okay, great. With that, then we will close the citizen comments. And if I could get a motion, we have one quick matter and close. Alderman Plufka.
Oh, I thought you were asking for a motion to go into closed session. I'm sorry.
I am. Yeah, you read my mind. Yeah, if we can get a motion
I
to go
would
into closed
move
session.
that we proceed into closed session and adjourn therefrom on the topics of legal revised Missouri statutes, chapter 610.021, subsection 1, real estate, revised Missouri statutes, chapter 610.021, subsection 2, and on regard to personnel, Missouri revised statutes, chapter 610.021, subsection 3.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderwoman Eveling?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
And Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. If we just get right off and get right back on the other Zoom connection, this shouldn't really take more than 5-10 minutes. Thank you.
Here.